Hi everyone, welcome back to the AIML roadmap series. Currently we are discussing about Python fundamentals. Last we discussed about the why we should use Python, how we should use it, the Python installation. Then we talked about how to define variables and certain data types, and then we also talked about some data collections. Right now, what we have learned till now, that how to output something. But what if um, how to output something? For example, this is a um, um, simple code snippet where what I am doing, I am creating a variable a which has a value of 4, variable b which is a value of 3, and then I am just simple doing a arithmetic operation, right? C is equal to a plus b, and then I am calling a print function which is printing the sum, right? So when I run it, I will get something like sum is 7, right? Because 3 plus 4 equals to 7. So now till now we have learned how to print something to the user. But what if user wants to interact with your code snippet? So how you can do that? So for that we have something called a Python function in Python. Okay, so similar how we have learned about the similar how we have this print function, similarly we have something called input function. Okay, so how you can do it? Some basic input as numbers, multiple inputs in single line, we'll talk about it, and how to you can give a prompt. So for example, let's start. For example, I want to, let's take the same example. Right now we have a4 b equals to 3, I'm doing c equals to a plus b, then I'm just printing sum is c, right? So let's say I'm doing this. Yeah, now what I want to pass this a from the user. So let's see how I can do it. So input, we have learned about it, and I'll pass this b from the user as well. Okay, now if I run it, so you see there is a prompt. So it is asking for let's say I give 2 and I give 3. Let's say run it. So do you see? So instead of printing 5, it is printing 23. So let me tell you. So when I do something like this, by default this function take input as a string, right? And we have learned if we combine a1 plus 2, we will get a string called 12, right? Instead of the summation. So how I can pass the input as a string? So remember we talked about typecasting, right? So in similar way we'll do it. For example, let's take same, a is equal to input. Now let's make it as int. Okay, so what I have done, I have typecasted my input function. So whatever I'll pass, let's say if I give 2, so 2 would be a string. Now I have casted it back to an int, right? So now let's do the same thing here as well. Int input, and now if I do something like this, it should, so if I pass 2 and 3, it should give me 5. Yeah, makes sense. So this is how we can pass the values of different so now let's see something again. So for example, I pass something like 2.3, and so you see when I'm passing a float value, it is giving me an error, invalid literal for int with base 10, because I am typecasting it as an int, so it will not work, right? So how I can pass the floats then? So like we talked about, similarly we could do a typecast with float, right? So once I'll do that, so what will happen? So if I'm doing 1.3, let's say 2, so So it will give me 3.3. Okay, so this is how you can take the input of different types. Okay, similarly you can do for boolean, list and strings and everything, right? Now what if instead of taking this 1.3 and 2 in different line, I want to pass them in a single line. So let's see how I can do that. So for example, I have something like a comma b, and what I want to take both as an input in a single line. So what I'll do is I'll say something like input this. First do this. So I'll do something like input, and what if I run it and I do something like 1 space 2. You see there is a value error. We talked about how to unpack, and we talked about how to pack and unpack, right? So we need to do something like we need to split it basically. So what we need to do is, if I'm passing a comma b equals to, let's say I'm saying input dot split. So if I'm passing, let's say 2, I'm passing 1 comma 2, what will happen, it will pass 1 comma 2, then it will split it, because I'm not passing anything, it will split by a space, right? So it will just print me. Okay, this is how you can do the inputs. Okay, different ways you can do an input. And if you see something right now, whenever I run it, it just give me an empty like a empty box to fill the input, right? But what if I want to pass some prompt as well? For example, I want to say something like, let's take this one. For example, I want to say something like input enter first number and something like enter second number. Okay, now when I run it, you will see it will prompt me a message. So enter first number should be, let's say 2, and then it say enter second number. So let's say I'll say 3, then output should be 5, right? So this is how inputs work in Python. Okay, it is important because sometimes you do end up taking, because that's the basic, right? So you need input from the user, you need to have that interactability. So that's how you can interact with the user. Okay, next topic we have is uh, the next topic we have is Python if else. So let's talk about what it means. For example, I have a list. For example, we have talked about list, right? I have a list which contains 1 2 3 4 5 and 6. So I want to find the numbers. I want to find the numbers which are divisible by 3, let's say. Okay, so right now, because the list is small, I can tell that 3 and 6, right? These are the only two numbers. But what if it is a list with 100 or more than 1000 items? Okay, and they are randomly distributed. Right now it's a sorted list, right? But let's say it has like more than thousands items. So then how I can do that? So in Python we have something called if blocks. Okay, so how I can do it is, we have learned about loops, right? So if I do something like 4 item in A, so what it will do, it will iterate for each item of A, right? And I only want the list of items which are list of numbers which are divisible by 3, right? So I can do something like this, right? So what will happen, let's quickly see. So it will only print me 3 and 6, right? Now what, yeah, this is how the if blocks works. Let's quickly go through the some text about it. So a basic if statement. So let's say I have a number x, I want to check whether this number is greater than 5 or not. So this is how you can define it. Something, and the second thing, I have something called an if else. We'll talk about it. We have something called if elif ladder, nested ifs, and some logical operators and condition. Okay, so let's start with basic. Okay, so when we say if uh, so if condition only works with logical conditions. Okay, so if I'm saying if a is greater than b, yeah, or if b is less than a, right? Or I can say something like a equals to b, or I can say a is not equals to b, right? Or something like a is greater than equals to b. You remember we talked about these operators, right? Logical operators. So these are the one that works with Python. And also one important thing we talked about, that we can only compare same data types, right? We cannot compare a string, like we cannot say string is less than 3, right? Because these two are of different data type, right? So this is how we can work. So now let's take an example. Let's say I have a number 1 which is 10, and I have a number 2 which is 20. Okay, now I want to check whether the number 1 is greater than number 2 or not. So I'll do something like this. Okay, so if number 1 is greater than number 2, I can print something like that number 1 is greater than number 2. Okay, so if you see, we talked about how the addition works. So this is the 4 spaces. Okay, now if I run it, it will not give me anything. The reason being the number 1 is not greater than 2, right? Now let's update the number 1. Now it should give me number 1 is greater than number 2, right? Now let's see one more thing. Right now it is printing number 1 is greater than number 2. What if I want to print 30 is greater than 20? And this 30 and 20 can change, right? And if you remember, we have learned about something called the formatting, right? So let's try that. So for example, I have, so how I can do it? So I can do something like f, right? I could pass it in a curly braces, and similarly I'll pass this variable in a curly braces, right? This is how we can do it. So now if I run it, so for this it will print me number 1 is greater than number 2, but for this it will print me 30 is greater than 20. Let's quickly verify it. Yeah, so this is how you can do it, right? Now, so you must be thinking that where we are using the if condition. So we can, like, in big projects or even in small projects, so what if you want to check whether today is a football match or not, or if you are logging on a site, sometimes when you enter your credentials it does not let you log in, right? Because there is some condition that's happening, right, in the backend. So that's how these if conditions work. Okay, one more thing is you can have, like, for example, I have this, right? So what if you have something else which is like, I want to check whether a number is greater than 10 or and smaller than 20. in the operators we talked about logical operators, right? So how we can do that is we can have something like, let's say I'll have let's combine the input. Okay, let's say I have a number 3. What I want is I want to take the input from user that enter a number. Now what I want to see whether this number is between 10 and 20 or not. Okay, so if it is, then you should print that number 3 is greater than 10 and less than 20, right? So let's quickly see how it works. So when I run it, it will prompt me for a number, right? And let's say I give 15. So 15 is between, right? 15 is greater than 10 and 15 is less than 20, right? This is how we can pass multiple conditions, right? This is something we have talked about earlier as well, but just wanted to clarify here as well. So this is how you can combine your comparison operators and your logical operators, right? Now we have something called elif. So elif is something that allows you to say that it's okay that this condition does not work, but let's check for some other condition as well. Okay, for example, let's say I have something like number 1 equals to 10 and let's say number 2 equals to 20. So I want to check whether this number is greater than number 2, then you should print number 1 is greater than number 2. And if this number is not, so let's say I have 3 conditions. Okay, if number 1 is greater than number 2, it should print that number 1 is greater than number 2. Okay, something like that. If num1 is less than num2, it should print something like num1 is less than number 2, right? But if this num1 is equals to number 2, like both are same, then it should print something like print num1 is same as num2. Okay, so how we can achieve it using if? You could do something like if number 1 is greater than number 2, then you can again call an if number 1 is less than number 2, right? We can do it, right? And the third is if number, yeah, this is how you can do it. Now if I run it, so for now it will only print me num1 is less, if num1 is less than, because 10 is less than 20. What if I change this to 30? It will print me number 1 is greater than number 2. Let's make it 20. It will print me num1 is same as num2. So this is one way to do it. So there is one more way to do it, which is introducing an elif statement. So first the user go here, it checks that num1 is greater than num2. It's not, let's say, then it will move to the next. So what I can do, I can, instead of saying this, I can make it elif. Okay, and similarly I can make it as elif. Now let's see what happens. See, it works fine. So what if I have 30? So it will run for the first one, because here the 30 is greater than 20, so it say number 1 is greater than number 2. What if I make it as 10? So it will say that num1 is less than num2, right? But if I make it as 20, it will say that num1 is same as num2, right? This is how you can use elif keywords. Okay, for example, let's take a very like mostly used example. So if somebody says that I want to check, so if let's say you are in school, right? So if you have a test in which you are assigned marks out of 100, right? And let's say if your marks are between if your marks are more than 80, your grade is A. Okay, if your marks is if your mark is greater than 80, your grade is A. If your marks is greater than 60, your grade is B, right? And if your mark is greater than let's say 40, your grade is C. And if you have something less than less than 40, your grade is, let's say, fail. Okay, so how I can implement it? So I'll show you both way how we can do it using if, and how we can use it using elif as well. So if I'm doing it with if, so for example, let's take a number, let's call it 3, and let's say I'll get it from the user, right? Sorry, input, and I'll pass some prompt. Let's say enter your marks, enter your marks out of 100. Okay, I'll do something like this. Yeah, now once I have this number, now let's add the if statements, right? Add the conditions to print the grade. So if what I have said, that if this number is greater than 80, I'm saying print a grade A, right? If this number is greater than 60, print the grade B, right? If this num is greater than 40, then print this grade as C, right? And if this num is less than 40, I'm saying that print fail, right? This is what I'm saying, right? So now if I run it, and if I say something like 90, so what I'll have is something like this, you see? So at first it will go here, so 90 is greater than 80, it will print me this, right? Next it will go here, 90 is greater than 60, it will print me B, right? Next it will go here, 90 is greater than 40, it will print me here. Next it will go here, 90 is less than 40, it false, so it will skip it. So now how we can do it? By elif. So I could mention something like elif here, elif here, and elif here. So let's see how it works now, how it goes now. So let's say I pass 90, so you see it only gave me grade A. So if it goes here, so for the first one he found, and so now it won't check for any more if statements, right? So it will just exit from here because none of these matched. Okay, now let's check it for, let's say, for 25, it is going for fail. Yeah, because 25 is greater than 80, no. 25 is greater than 60, no. 25 is greater than 40, no. 25 is less than 40, right? So that's how it works. Okay, also why to use this elif? So the moment it founds a true condition, for example, in case of 80, in case of 90, let's say it found, so it found the condition is true, right? So it will stop, it will not unnecessarily run for rest of the elif statements, okay, or whatever statements we have. Okay, so this is how the elif works. Okay, now we have something called else. Okay, for example, let somebody says that let's say somebody says if now a number is greater than 30, then print you are in. right? And if it's not, it does not matter what the number is now, okay? If not, just print that you are out, right? So how we can implement it? We could have something, let's say the number is 40, for example. So I could do something like, if number is greater than 30, I can say something like this, that you are in, right? You are in. Now he says that for everything, so if number is greater than 30, basically what it is saying, that if number is less than equals to 30, right, then you should print it. So if this works, but so I need to add another condition, which is for, let's say elif, which is number is less than 30, so you are out. So if I run it, so it will give me you are in, but if I change this number to, let's say 30, it should show me you are out, right? But instead of doing elif, I could simply say something like else, okay? So if I don't know the condition, so here I know that if number is less than 30, you should say something like you are out, but the user is only interested is that if the number is greater than 30, you should print it, and otherwise you should just print anything, okay? Then you could simply use else. So this else does not require a condition, okay? So this is basically a default nature, like if something above is not working, then this else block will work, right? Yeah, this is how it works in Python. Okay, now let's see how we can combine our if, elif and else, how we can do it, okay? So the way we can do it is, for example, let's take a very simple example of yeah, we can take the same example, let's say this, okay? We have something like this. Let's take the same example. So I have an assignment which is grading grades out of 100, okay? So I'm saying if the mark is greater than 80, it should give A. If mark is greater than 60, it should be B. Greater than 40, it should be C. And for everything else, it should be fails, right? So how we can implement it? I could simply say that for if this number is greater than 80, then it should give me A. If number is greater than 60, it should give me 60. B. If number is greater than 40, it should give me C. And for everything else, you should just print it fail, right? So let's quickly see how it works. Let's say my mark is 23, so it should give me fail, right? So this is how you can combine your if, elif and else statements, right? Okay, so most of the time what we say that else is a default statement or a fallback statement, the default or a fallback statement. So for example, if nothing works, we run this statement, okay? Now we'll talk about something called a shorthand if, okay? So shorthand if is something, so right now what we are doing, right? So for example, we have a number 1 equals to 10. We are doing something like, if number 1 is greater than 5, let's say, I am printing something like number 1 is greater, okay? Now if I run it, it will show me number 1 is greater. So how I can write, for now you can see I am creating it in 2 lines. There's a indentation, right? So I could also do it in a single line as well. So how I can do it is, I could just simply say if num1 is greater than 5, then what it should do is should just simply print it, okay? See, this is how we can do it. Similarly, we could do it for else as well, if else as well. So for example, if number is greater than 5, it should print this, else it should print, say num1 is smaller, for example. Okay, now let's replace it with something called, let's see if it works or not. Okay, I have 3 is greater than 5 if this happens, else this. So let's see if it works or not. It should not work because the syntax is incorrect. So how we should write it is, so we should write it something like, so let's say print num1 is greater if this num1 is greater than 5, or else we should do something like this. So let's replace it with 3. So if 3 is greater than 5, no, right? This will not go, so it will go for the else. So answer should be num1 is smaller. Okay, so this is how you can do it. So the same thing you could also do with indentation as well, but this is a shorthand ways to do it, because in a large database, if something is quick to do it, you could always go for these shorthand expressions. Okay, now how to assign a value. So if you see something this we have done, so what if I want to do is, let's say I have two numbers, num1 equals to 10, let's say num1 equals to 2 10, and let's say num2 equals to 20, right? So what I want is, I want to create a variable num3 which should have the difference, no sorry, let's say I want to create a num3 which should contain the number which is the bigger. Okay, so how I can do it, so I could do something like, if num1 is greater than num2, we can have num3 equals to num2, right? And and else we can have num3 equals to num2, right? This is how we can do it. Print num3, let's quickly verify it. So right now 10 is greater than 2, which is false, so num3 should be num2. Now how I could do it with the shorthand is, I could simply do something like num3 equals to num2 if num1 is greater than num2, or else it is num2, right? Sorry, it should be num2 if num1 is, it should be num1 if num1 is greater than num2, otherwise it should be num2. Okay, so let's run it. So it is 20, right? So this is how we can do it. Now right, we can, so right now there are only two conditions. So if is true, else is true. We can also have like multiple conditions as well. So for example, we could have multiple conditions as well, like we were doing here, like combining, where we were doing, yeah, combining, where we were doing, somewhere we were doing that is, yeah, somewhere like similar to this. So we can have multiple if statements as well, right? We'll talk about it. Yeah, okay. Now we'll talk about the logical operators, how we can combine if with logical operators. We have already seen it, something similar here, but let's try it again with all the operators. Okay, so we know we have 3 logical operators, right? So now let's try it for all. So for example, I want to check, let's say I have three numbers, num1 equals to 10, num2 equals to 20, and num3 equals to 30, for example, and I want to check whether the number 2, if 20 is less than num1 and 20 is less than num2 or not. So how I could do it is, if num1 is less than num2 and if num2 is less than num3, right? If it is true, then let's say we can say that num2 is between num1 and num3, right? This is something we can say, and you will see that you don't have anything. So the reason being, okay, it should be 3. Let's quickly verify it. Okay, so num1 is between num1 and num3. Now I want to see that this yeah, now let's check with or. We know that or works with either, like either the first condition is true or either the second condition is true. So let's say I want to check this. Let's take the same condition. Okay, if num1 is less than or num2 is, so that means that num1 is either less than num1 or greater than num2, right? Greater than num3. Let's quickly check it. Yeah, let's let's change the value of 2 to, let's say, 40. So we do this, so I'll get again same, right? Because 40 is less than 10, false. But 40 is greater than 10, true. But 40 is less than 30, false. So this condition is true and this condition is false. So true or false should be true, right? Let's change it to something like, let's say, what should I change it to, so that the both conditions are false? Okay, let's change it to 10. So 10 is less than 10, false. 10 is less than 30, true, right? So this will work. Okay, next we have not. So not will just reverse it, right? So for example, if number 1 is greater than number 2, so which is num1 is greater than num2, right? So this should be it. Okay, so because num1 is not greater than, let me just redefine them. Num1 equals to 30 and num2 equals to 10. Okay, so 30 is greater than 10, true. Now if I just add a simple not here, so let's see if it works or not, right? So because this is true, now this whole will become false, right? So if it is false, then it will not work. But let's say I change it to something like 40, and now see, so this will work. So it should be num1 is not greater, right? Makes sense? This is how you can use your if conditions with logical operators. Okay, now I think we have already talked about the truth tables, but let's quickly go through it. And truth table. So let's say first condition is true and second condition is true, then the overall value is true, right? If the first condition is true and the second condition is false, then the overall value is false, right? First condition is false and second condition is true, then the overall condition is false, right? If the first condition is false and the second condition is false, then the overall value should be false, right? This is how the AND works. And similar for OR truth table, we'll have something like, if first condition is true or second condition is true, then the output is true, right? If first condition is true and second condition is false, then the output should true, because at least one condition should be true, right? And next we have the first condition yeah, if the first condition is false and the second condition is true, then the output should be true, because one of the condition is true, right? Similarly for false, both the condition is false, so that overall value is false. Now for the not truth table, so if not true it becomes false, if not false it will become true, right? It will just reverse the value. Okay, this is how you can do the logical operators. How we discussed above, you can also, if you do something like, you can have nested logical operators as well. Okay, that will work as well. Okay, next we have something called if, nested ifs. Okay, so for example, you have something like, let's say you have something like, if let's say that mark example as well. You have marks out of 100. Okay, so if the student get marks greater than 80, then grade is a, but if he has also scored, let's say scored marks greater than 90 in maths, then his grade becomes A with maths specialize, something like that. Okay, so how we can do it is, we can do something like, let's say we have marks equals to, let's say 90, and we have maths marks equals to 95, for example. Okay, so you can do something like, if marks is greater than 80, we have the grade A, and if maths marks is greater than 90, we could say something like, the marks is greater than 90, we could say something like A specialized, right? Makes sense? Now the problem becomes, for a student whose marks is 890, but whose marks are greater than 80, but whose math marks are less than, for example, 90, so he does not get a grade, right? So how I can write it is, if marks is greater than 80, so he's a A grader, right? But if his marks is greater than 90, then he is a math specialized. So if I run it, so it will print me both. It will give me a grade and it will print me math specialized. Let me quickly verify it, right? Now what if I want this, if this condition is true, if this both condition are true, then I don't want to print A, I just want to print A math specialized. So how I can do it is, I could just remove this here, and I could say something like else, and let's see. So what will happen here, I'll just have A math specialized, and if the person has marks less than 90, for example this, then I'll have just grade A, right? This is how the nested ifs work. Okay, yeah, next we have something called a pass statement in ifs. So for example, okay, for example, you have two numbers, num1 equals to 10 and num2 equals to 20. Now if num1 is less than num2, no, let's say if num1 is same as num2, you know what to do. You want to just print and say that num1 is same as num2. Now he says that, let's say if num1 is greater than num2. Okay, so I don't know right now what to print, so I could just say pass. Okay, so if I run it, and let's say for the rest is num1 is less than, so that will work, right? So let's quickly check it. So here the num1 is 10 and num2 is 20, so it is saying num1 is less than num2. So for example, let me just change it to 30. So 30 is greater than 20, so it will go with this condition. So here it will print nothing, right? It will not do anything at all. So the pass statement is, it will just exit this if condition and it will not throw any error. So it is considered as a null operation. Okay, as a null operation, so it will not fail. But what if you do something? Let's see, if num1 is greater than num2, so I don't want to do anything, for example. So if I run this, I'll get an error. So because this expects something, right? So I could pass a null operator, right? So yeah, this is how it works. Okay, now you must be thinking that why we have this pass. So sometimes when you are building a project, any project, and you know the structure that you want to do something when num1 is greater than num2, but you don't know what to do, right? So you put a placeholder there. So this pass is like a placeholder, that it will not fail it, but it will not do anything as well. So in the future you can update it. Okay, so this is how it works. Okay, next thing, if you remember, we have something like comments as well. So what if I do something like here? So let's say if it works, so it also will not work, right? So we need to pass the pass operator. Okay, you got it? Why we cannot leave it empty, or we cannot just put a comment? Okay, we need to make it as a section basically. Okay, so this is how we can use if. So we have talked about how to create a simple if statement, we have talked about if else, we have talked about else if ladder, we have talked about nested ifs, how we can do it with shorthand ifs, we have talked about, and we have talked about logical operators, and we talked about the pass statement and the if and the nested ifs, right? Now the next thing we have is for loops. If you remember, we have already discussed these, but now we have a section for it, so let's quickly go through it, right? So loops is something that if you want to repeat something, right? So for example, you have something like, you have a list like a equals to 1 2 3 4 and 5. So instead of printing each item, 1 print 2, something like that, instead of doing this, okay, I did something, okay, sorry. So instead of doing this, you could simply call a loop, right? For item in a, right? So you see, this work is same as this, right? So that's where the loops come in. So basically, if you want to iterate over a sequence, it can be a list, a tuple, a dictionary, a string, or a set, right? If you want to iterate over a sequence, then you can use loops. So we have two types of loops, for and a while loop. So a for loop is something you iterate over a sequence like a string, like a list, string, ranges. We talked about range, right? Python range. Or if we have something like a dictionary or anything, we can use for loop, where we know where to start and where to end. But for example, you don't know that, right? You only know that if there is a condition happened, so you just need to skip leave it. So for example, there we have the while loop. So while loop runs as long as the condition is true, right? So let's say you have a sequence of numbers and you want to count the numbers till a particular particular item appears, right? So for example, you have a random list of 100 numbers. Okay, you want to count the numbers till 77 appears in the list. So there you can have a while loop. You can also do it using for loop as well, but you should you should try it with a while loop. We'll discuss how we can do that. Okay, so yeah, so let's start with a for loop. Okay, first, so if you remember, we had an example of fruits. Let's take that same example quickly, somewhere above. Okay, just give me a second. Okay, yeah, let's take the same example. Okay, so let's take the same example. Let's make it a list. So for example, let's quickly print it. Let's quickly print the type of it as well, right? So it should be the list, and then the type of the list should be list, right? Now if I want to loop through it, you already know how to do it. So for fruit in fruits, right? So it will run for each element, right? You can do something like this. I just want to print the fruit, right? This is how it works. Yeah. Now what if I have a string. For example, I have a string a equals to string, and I want to print each element. So how I can do that is, so for example, a equals to string. For s in string, I could do print s, right? Okay, something is wrong. Okay, sorry. Sorry, this should be something like this, and it should be a, right? This is how I could do it. If you remember, while working with list, we also talked about how we can loop through using length and indexing, right? So we could do something like for I in range length of fruits, right? Sorry, length of fruits and print fruits of I, right? Remember, we have done this. So here the length, how it will break is, length will have something like length. What do we have? Length 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. Sorry, 1 2 3 4 5 7 8. So range is 8. So we will have 0 to 7, right? And we know indexing, how indexing works. Fruits of 0 is apple. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, right? This is how we can do it, right? Now we have something like call a break statement. Let's see what happens, what it does. For example, let's take this same example, and and somebody is saying, let's take a different example, so that, yeah. Okay, so let's say I have something, a very simple list, which is list 1, which is a list of 10 numbers. Okay, 1 2 3 4 5 6, let's say list of 6 numbers, and I'll have some, for example, what I want is, I want to print the numbers until it find, let's say, 4. The moment it finds 4, it should just break it. So how I can do that? So for, we know how to loop through a list. For item in list, what I want is, I want to print, but the moment this item becomes 3, I should just exit this loop, right? So let's see how it works. So for example, you know, it will loop through 1 2 3 4 5 and 6, right? So the first time the item becomes 1, right? So it will just print, it will print 1. Next it goes, item becomes 2, it will print 2, right? Next it goes, item becomes 3, now it will print 3, right? Now there is a condition which is saying that if item equals to 3, which is, right, then it will just break out of it. Now the loop ended. Okay, this is how we can use the break statement. So we can stop the loop before it has looped through all the items. So what if it is not there? It will simply print all the items, right? But I only want the items which are till 3, right? So that's how you can use break statement in Python. Next I have something like a continue. So what if I want, so I have a list this, what if I want to print all the items except 3? So how I can do it is, just let me just copy paste it. How I can do it is, instead of saying break, I'll just mention a keyword called continue. So let's see what happens is, so I'll start with 1 2 3 4 5 6. So item becomes 1, item becomes 1, so it will print 1, 1 equals to 3. No, for go it will go for 2, item becomes 2, it will print 2, and item equals to 3. No, again, now it will become 3, right? And it will print 3. Now it will check if item 3 equals to 3, it will should be yes, right? Then it is doing continue, which we don't know right now what is, right? Now this again, it will go back and I'll have something called 4, it will print 4, right? And it will check here, 4 equals to 3, no, right? And similarly for item 5 and 6, right? So for 5 also it will go and it will print 5 and 6, but the second condition remains false. Now let's see what happens here. So when I run it, so it will print me all the, okay, wait, let me just add something like, okay, just give me a second, let's have some clarity here. Okay, so let's run it, print continue, just to have that difference. Okay, so you see it will print me 1 2 3 4 5 6. Okay, so the reason it print 3, because we are printing 3 here. Let's remove it from here and put it here. So what will happen now, for 3 it will go to 3, it will check the condition which becomes yes, so it will not print it. Now let's check it. So I should have 1 2 4 5 6. Okay, so this is how the continue works. Okay, next I have something called a range, which you guys already know how it works. So for example, I have something like 4 x in range 10, it will print me numbers from 0 to 9, right? Makes sense. Now if I have something called 4x in range 1 comma 10, it will print me numbers from 1 to 9, right? And now if I say something like this, it will print me odd numbers between 1 to 9, है ना, 1 3 5 7 9. Now we'll have something like nested loops. So the name in itself is pretty much complete. How we have been checking for nested list, tuples, dictionaries, or the if-else. Similarly, we have nested loops as well. For example, for example, you have something like 4I in range 5, let's say. So it will run from 0 to 4, right? And I have another j in range, let's say 2. So it will run for 0 and 1. Now I want to print is I into j. Okay, so the first one will run for 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4. The second one will run for 0 and 1. So in total, how it will run? So for initially this loop will go for 0. So let's see how it will run. When I equals to 0, it will go inside. It will run for both 0 and 1. Okay, and for 0 it will print 0 into 0, which will be 0, right? And for 1 it will be 0 into 1, which will be 0 again, right? Now it will go for j equals to 1, right? And it will work for both 0 and 1, right? Now for 0 it will do 0, I, this is I, right? It will do I into j, right? So 0 into j is 0, right? The second it will do 1 into 1, which would be 1, right? This is how it will work. Okay, similarly it will work for I equals to 2, and the j becomes 0 and 1, right? 0 and 1. Now for 0 into 2 is 0 and 1 into 2 is 2, right? For I equals to 3, j remains 0 and 1, right? And the values will have 0 into 3 0 and 1 into 3 is 3, right? Similarly for I equals to 4, will have, it will go with 0 and 1. So 4 into 0 is 0 and 4 into 1 is 4. Now let's run it and see how it's working. You see, 0 0 1 0 2 0 3 and 0 4. Okay, this is how the nested loops work. Basically a loop within a loop, right? Now we'll have something called a pass statement here as well, like similar we were having in a similar way like we were having in if. So pass statement is like an empty operator. So for example, let's say for example you have a 4I in range 5 and you don't know what to do inside this, so you can simply do pass, and the moment you do it, it will not do anything. Okay, so this is how the pass statement works in pass and loops. Okay, sorry, the pass statement works in loops. Okay, similar to if. Okay, next we'll have a while loop, right? We talked about how the while loop works is we can execute a set of statements until a condition is true. Okay, for example, I have a number is equal to 0 is equal to, let's say, 1, and I want to run it till it is less than or equals to 5, for example. Okay, so I want to print basically 1 2 3 4 and 5. Okay, so how I can do it is I can define a while. This is a keyword again. I'll define the condition, which is num is less than equals to 5. What I want to do, I want to print the number, and I need to mention a condition, an increment also. Okay, so let's see if it so it will give me. So for example, I missed to add this num plus 1. Okay, let's remove it for a second, and if I do it now, so you see Okay, so the reason, because num, sorry, let me reinstate num as well. Num equals to 1. So now if I run it, so you will see that it is running forever, if you see, because there is no increment or decrement condition. Okay, so let me just stop it. Okay, so this condition is required, otherwise it will go into a forever loop. And this is something which like you should be very careful while working with loops. Okay, next we have something similar like we did in for loop. We have something called a break statement. For example, the same, I'll start with 1, it will go till 5. So if 3 occurred, it should break, so it should print me, okay, something happened, okay, because I missed the increment condition. So it should be something like this. Okay, so you see 1 2 3 stopped at 3, it exits the loop at 3. Okay, next, similar how we did for loop, we have something called a continue here. So what if I want to print everything except 3? So how I could do it is, let's redefine it, and I could do something like, let's me just change it from here, right? And what I want to do, if num equals to 3, then you should just skip it basically. Okay, so the continue is something to skip a condition basically, so it will only print me, okay, something has changed, it will num equals to okay, something has changed, wait, okay, it's running. Okay, you see it is running an infinite loop. Let me tell you why. Okay, so you see something happened. So the moment it entered the loop, right, so the moment 3 comes and becomes 3, it will continue, basically it will get back here. So now the 3, it will come here again, then it will go back, right, the 3 continue, it will go back. So this loop is, because you see this condition is at the end, right, so we need to move it from here to, let's say, somewhere here. So now if I run it, it will work fine, right? 2 3 2 4 6, yeah, this is how you can do it. This is how you can work through for loops and the while loops. Okay, we have learned how to do the for loops, and we have learned how to do the while loops. We have understood how the break statement or a continue statement or a pass statement works. Okay, so we have understood the for loops, how they can iterate over a sequence. We have understood that for while loop we need a if condition, we need a condition till the loop will work. We have understood how we can break out of loops. We have understood about continue. We have also seen how the infinite loops work. Okay, I think that's all for this session, and whenever we meet next, we'll start with something called functions. Okay, take care, bye.